What's up, everybody? Welcome to Show Me the Meaning, Wisecrack's movie podcast. My name is Jared, and we've got a very special episode today. Today, we've got a double collab. In studio with me today is Michael from Lessons from the Screenplay. Good to have you again, Michael.
Yeah, excited to be here.
And we have Sage from Just Right again.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, great to have both of you here. We did Seven with Michael, and then over a year ago, we did Network with Sage, which is still one of the best movies ever.
Right. I thought you meant 7 podcasts with Michael.
Oh, no. We did the Fincher movie 7. So today we're talking about Blade Runner. Oh, by the way, before we do that, I did tell everybody that we were doing Midsummer this week, but because it's VidCon and Sage was in town, we decided to push that back a week so we could take advantage of having him here in the studio. But we will be doing Midsummer next week. But today, we're doing Blade Runner, the 1982 film directed by Ridley Scott, starring Harrison Ford, Rutger Hauer, and Sean Young. As always, we're going to go around and see what people think of this movie, what was it like the first time they watched it, what was it like watching it for this podcast, or if you didn't rewatch it, what was it like the last time you've seen it, because I'm sure many of us have seen it many times, because we've all made videos about this movie. So let's start with the guy from out of town. Let's start with Sage. Sage, how is Blade Runner rank in your life?
Man, just hearing you say who this movie is starring just kind of like gave me chills, because these actors are so incredible.
Yeah.
Rutger Hauer in this movie is incredible.
Legendary.
Sean Young is immaculate in this film. I don't have too long of a history with Blade Runner. I think the first time I saw it was like maybe 5 years ago. And it took me a while to like get on its groove, but man, watching this movie, it just puts you in a mindscape that like no other movie gets you in.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Also, any of you guys, what cuts of this movie have you guys seen? Well, first, let's hear what Michael has to say.
Sure. I saw Blade Runner, I think, back in college, so 10, 11 years ago, something, math. And I did not like it the first time because it was slow and boring, and I was like, I don't get it. And then I saw it again later, and I was like, this is genius. This is amazing. And I feel like that's a trend that I've seen a lot of people have with Blade Runner. Is the first time it's kind of hard to get into it. And then the second time, I think I knew more of the context, and I just kind of like fell in love with it. And I think part of that was also, I think the first cut that I watched was the theatrical cut.
Oh, wow.
Like, I think it had the voiceover and like all that stuff. And then the second time was the final cut, which is my personal favorite.
So I've only ever seen the director's cut and the final cut. So how bad is the theatrical cut?
Different people have their preferences. In my opinion, it's pretty bad. Like, the voiceover narration just doesn't, like, it feels kind of like it should work because it's in that noir detective, history. But, even when I was doing research for my video, Harrison Ford did not like the voiceover. Like, there's footage of him doing it, and he's just kind of half-heartedly saying it because he didn't believe that it was going to be in the movie. He thought there's no way they're going to use this, so he wasn't even trying. And then that's what they used. So I feel like it's pretty bad in my opinion.
Okay. And then have you seen only the final cut, Sage?
Yeah, it's just been the final cut.
Yeah. I don't really remember the difference between the director's cut and the final cut. I think that the unicorn thing is added into the final cut.
I actually looked this up today.
Okay.
So they expanded the unicorn dream sequence in the final cut, but it was initially put into the director's cut.
And how familiar are you guys with Blade Runner 2049? Because I've only seen it once. I need to see it again. But there are certain things I found myself asking, like, okay, at this movie, people ask, is Deckard a replicant? And then I say, wait, was that answered in 2049 or not?
Yeah, I've seen 2049 twice.
Okay.
I don't feel like I've analyzed it yet.
Yeah,
that's why I haven't unpacked it.
So you guys, to give you guys some background, Michael and Sage, I was like, what movie do you guys want to cover? And they said, what about one of the Blade Runners? And I said, all right, I feel much more equipped to do the first one because the second one I've only seen once, and I've seen this movie like 4 or 5 times. And yeah, the second one I'm just like, all right, I need to put some time aside to analyze that one.
Yeah. And on the question of Deckard being a human or a replicant, I think Ridley Scott is the only one who thinks he's a replicant.
Oh, really?
Like everyone else involved in the production is like he's human. And really, like, it's not even so interesting answering the question. It's more for me, like the interesting part about it is that you're even asking the question.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's so few differences between the humans and the replicants that you never know. Maybe you could be one.
Yeah.
Right. So I think in 2049 they go off the assumption that he's a human.
Okay.
Especially I don't know if replicants can have children. That's a
right. Well, I feel like
sure
that's
that's a
the
plot
thing
point.
of 2049. Is that's
Yeah.
the special thing that happened for the first time.
Yeah.
But that was actually one of my problems with 2049 is that I feel like it does kind of answer that concretely that
Yeah.
Deckard is a human because he gets old and he dies and all that stuff. Spoiler alert. But
that's kind of an anti-spoiler alert because he doesn't die.
oh, that's right. He doesn't die. Oh, right. Okay. Well, I'm going to stop
Other
talking about
people-
who
None
dies.
of us know 2049 very well. I
Other
guess.
people die.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it, but that was one of the things I didn't like about it is that it did kind of have to answer that for sure, whether or not he was human. And I do like that it's open ended in the final cut of Blade Runner, and sort of like you said, Sage, it's asking the question and lets you kind of think about what that means.
Now, what year does the original Blade Runner take place?
Actually, it's the perfect year to be recording this because it's 2019
Oh, okay.
in November. So we're 4 months early.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 2049, he's 30 years older. Because I was wondering if maybe Harrison Ford, if they don't address it in 2049, maybe it could just be that he ages quickly like Rutger Hauer's, or like, I guess Rutger Hauer's character doesn't age quickly. He just expires quickly. Never mind. Going down a tangent. Today we're talking about Blade Runner, not Blade Runner 2049. But anyway, this movie, I've seen it probably 4 or 5 times. As I said, the first time I saw it was also in college. I saw the final cut, and I was just in the right mood. It's a very sleepy movie, and I think I really just was in this stage where I had just seen Risky Business for the first time, and I really liked the kind of 80s trance music. I mean, that one's Tangerine Dream. It's not in this one, but I really, really connected with it, and it really just put me in this state. It really captured this tone that I thought was really, really unique, and even in the final cut, it still does that. This movie visually seems like an impossible achievement to me. When I watch this movie, it's so beautiful, I can't even believe that it happened. That it's... Yeah, I mean, every shot looks like it took 2 days to light.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And it kind of sounds like that is what happened. Like that's one of my favorite parts about the Blu-rays that they release is they have these like really long documentaries about the making of Blade Runner, and it was such a difficult process to make because of Ridley's vision and all the things required to light it, and to have these big like street scenes, and it's in the rain, and there's all these like cars that have to move, and all the timing of things, and it was going way over budget and all this stuff. And so I think it kind of is an impossible movie because it almost didn't happen and probably shouldn't have happened. Like if the people financing it knew what it was going to be, they would never have said yes. But it just kind of kept just barely being enough to like make it happen and all that stuff. So it is beautiful.
And they had to cut it 5 times before it actually did happen.
Right.
So,
Do you guys think directors can get away with that kind of perfectionism these days?
I don't know.
that's a good question. Like not in certain areas of the movie industry, like not with a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
Maybe with other kinds of movies.
Yeah. I feel like I would say either like in a really low budget setting or on like a streaming service like a Netflix. Like I feel like Netflix would let David Fincher do whatever he wanted, basically. So I feel like in those kind of lower stakes, quote unquote, arenas, there's probably more room for that perfectionism.
Or with like an established director like Wes Anderson or Quentin Tarantino who have like very specific styles and tones. Like they can get away with making sure that is there because it's like the entire selling point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also wonder with CGI if even that kind of creative control just requires less mania on set because so much you can just add in post, whereas in Blade Runner 2049 you literally had to coordinate 7 teams, one doing the lighting, one doing the technological effects and all that stuff going on. That seems to so effortlessly work in concert to create this fucking beautiful movie that I can't believe every time I see it. But anyway, let's go into a recap. Ex-Blade Runner Rick Deckard is brought back into the Force and tasked with tracking down and exterminating a group of Nexus 6 replicants, or superpowered androids used as off-world slave labor that are illegal on Earth. Deckard visits the office of Eldon Tyrell, the tycoon who created the replicants, where he meets his assistant Rachel, who doesn't even know that she is a replicant. Meanwhile, the replicants Roy, Leon, and Pris seek an audience with Tyrell in order to gain a longer life. They are pointed in the direction of engineer J.F. Sebastian, who will lead them to Tyrell. Rachel confronts Deckard about being a replicant, and after retiring another replicant, Deckard is accosted by Leon, who almost kills him, but Rachel saves Deckard in the nick of time by shooting Leon. After Deckard recovers, he and Rachel share an intimate moment. Pris and Roy find J.F. Sebastian and make him lead them to Tyrell. Roy asks Tyrell for a longer life, and when Tyrell declines, Roy kills him. Deckard kills Pris and pursues Roy to a rooftop where Roy monologues about the horrors he's seen as he peacefully expires. Deckard rendezvous with Rachel, and right before they're about to flee the city, Deckard finds an origami unicorn. End of movie. All right, so Sage, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said earlier, it's like, does it even matter if he's a replicant? Which is actually one of the reasons why when 2049 came out, I was a little bit disappointed that Harrison Ford was even in it, because let's just leave that, all right, enough about 2049.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's talk about, I think the big thing about replicants is memories in this movie. Rachel discovers that her memories have been implanted and that none of them actually happened. And at the beginning, Deckard is keen on suggesting that there's a clear distinction between replicant and human. And since Rachel's memories didn't happen to her, that makes her different than him. But at the end, after Deckard's final confrontation with Roy, he realizes that no matter if your memories are created organically or digitally implanted, all of our experiences, no matter how important, personal, or profound, will ultimately wash away like tears in rain. And there's that really cool part. And so what's the other replicant's name? Leon. He's preoccupied with his precious photos. And but yeah, let's talk about that last scene. When you guys watched that scene for the first time with Roy kind of dying, saying time to die, I've seen things, what did you guys initially take away from it, and what do you guys take away from it now?
Great question. This movie's so incredible that it makes you feel for the antagonist as he's dying. I don't know if I have a great answer to your question. I mean, tears and rain, that memories slip away and they are ultimately meaningless is kind of what's going on, unless you can stay alive, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. When I watched it this time, I thought maybe that the reason why, even though Deckard just killed Pris, the reason why Roy doesn't kill Deckard, is because maybe he thinks that only by telling him about the horrors that he saw while he was a slave, that would be the only way that his memories don't go to waste like tears and rain.
Right.
If the memories live on through Deckard in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. At the end, he says, "Quite an experience to live in fear, isn't it? That's what it is to be a slave."
Yeah.
And that's the moment that he, Roy realizes that Deckard is capable of fear, and kind of recognizes the humanity in Deckard, which is kind of the opposite of what you think would happen in this movie.
Yeah.
You think that it's going to end with Deckard realizing the humanity in the replicants.
Right.
But yeah, you have that beautiful scene where Roy Beatty.
It's so good.
Yeah. And again, what you're saying about just the staging of it too, how every frame has it's just covered in rain and the lighting of it. It's beautiful. I don't know. I'll pass it off to me.
Yeah. I mean, so just again, remembering the stories from the set, I feel like that was one of the last scenes that they shot, because it was basically at the point where the studio was like, we're pulling the plug in 2 days. Finish your movie by then. And so it was trying to capture this ending, and the sun was coming up, and a lot of the lines, or some of the lines anyway, that he says are improvised, and he was kind of adding while they were shooting. And so I feel like that almost adds to the magic of that ending. It's just pulling it off was such a crazy thing that it was kind of a miracle that it happened. And I feel like that spirit somehow comes across in those last moments also. But yeah, it is such it's kind of an interesting point that I hadn't really thought about, that you pointed out, Sage, is that it's him realizing the humanity in Deckard, and that's such a beautiful kind of irony, and I think a really nice end piece to this film that's exploring what does it mean to be alive, and we have these kind of things that we use to tell ourselves, well, we're humans and we're alive because we have memories and we have souls and all these things. Right. And it's kind of poking holes in all of that.
Yeah, and like the test that they do at the beginning, like the which I'm gonna forget the name of.
Void Comp.
The Void Comp. But it's designed to provoke emotion, which like suggests that like the people who designed that test believe that you have to show emotion in order to be human. Mm-hmm. But when you're watching the movie, the only people who are really showing emotion are the replicants.
Right.
Like every actual human is like really cold and distant, and so is the environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some interesting things with Roy, especially. Roy seems to be the smartest and most cultured character in the movie. So when they meet the guy who created their eyes, Roy quotes a modified excerpt from William Blake's America, a Prophecy. He says, "Fiery the angels fell, deep thunder rolled about their shores, burning with the fires of Orc." Rutger Hauer's just so good. I can only attempt to emulate. Yeah,
he actually Rutger suggested putting that line.
I also heard he suggested the Tears and Rain line.
Oh my God. Why isn't he a writer? Like,
I think I saw that same documentary that you were talking about.
What's he doing? Do it like voicing Kingdom Hearts movies?
Is that what he's doing?
Or Kingdom Hearts video games? Yeah, he's the bad guy in Kingdom Hearts.
No way.
Wow.
Him and Haley Joel Osment.
Yeah, that's
right. So there's also a line that speaks to what you guys are saying that is repeated twice at the end when Edward James Olmos' character, who I don't actually know the character's name, he says, "It's too bad she won't live, but then again, who does?" Yeah. So
it's Gaff.
Oh, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So whether it's they live 4 years or 400 years, eventually we all die. And I think that when Deckard and Rachel leave, it's kind of like one must live in the now, no matter whether she's a replicant or not. Mm-hmm. And we have to savor our memories, whether fake or not. The fact that we have them is what makes us human or sentient or whatever you want to call it.
Actually, do you have more on that Blake quote?
No, I don't have the whole text of the poem here.
Oh, okay, because actually I looked.
Oh, cool, go for it.
About it, because it's from America, a Prophecy.
Yeah.
Which is a poem by William Blake, written 1793. So it's like just after the American Revolution. And what he's referencing there is that Orc in that poem is basically a representative of the American Revolution. Mm. You can kind of liken it to, the devil in Paradise Lost, right? So it's like the rebellious devil rebelling against God.
Yeah.
So that's what he was seeing as what America is doing now. But the way that the lines are changed in Blade Runner versus the poem. So it starts with "Fiery the angels fell" in the movie, but the line is actually "Fiery the angels rose." So there's basically like a reversal of those the two ideas there. So like in the poem, the angels are rising with this revolution, and now you have Rutger Hauer's character saying that they're dying. So it's kind of like basically saying like America is dying, which is like a huge thing in this movie, where like one of the first lines you hear is the blimp advertising off-world colonies, right? Mm-hmm. And like the lines in that are I had them here. I have notes everywhere. Yeah. It's basically it's like, the off-world colonies, they're the land of opportunity, right? And you can go and have a life there. It's basically the promise of America, but it's not America anymore.
Yeah, and of course the whole set looks like it's kind of I don't know if it's necessarily post-apocalyptic, but the world looks like a shithole.
Yeah.
There's tons of pollution. I really like how they communicate that with there's just light pollution throughout everything. There's no scene that doesn't have some sort of egregious beam of light coming through the frame.
Coming off of an Atari sign.
Yeah, there were a lot of Atari signs I noticed.
Yeah.
But on the thing about the angels dying, and maybe you already suggested this, but it seems like it could also be that they are the fiery angels that were created by their god and then cast into hell, which is the off-world colony where they were doing slave labor, and now they're you could say they were uprising, but I guess they're not really, because all they're doing is looking for more life.
Right. Or you could, Earth could be hell in this scenario, and the off-world colonies are are heaven, right?
Yeah.
And the line from Paradise Lost is better to rule in hell than be a slave in heaven.
Right.
So,
and they were slaves in heaven.
exactly.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, you guys, both your channels, which are some of my favorite channels, by the way, really glad to have both of you guys, but you guys focus specifically on writing. And this movie really does seem to, so much of it is based on the very slow pacing, the very bassy dialogue. So when you guys engage with this movie, how much of it do you ascribe its merit to the directing versus the script, as opposed to a traditional movie that you guys would analyze?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the challenges I had when looking at this movie is that I personally feel so much of it is in the directing and the performances and the music and just the cinematography. I feel like it's a better film than screenplay. Like, I think if you just looked at the screenplay, you might think that this is a ridiculous movie, and it doesn't really. The structure is kind of weird, and like I said, it's a very slow pacing, and that's why I feel like it's not an example of like a perfect film, but I think it's a good example of how sometimes you can let go of structural perfection and achieve something else. Like, if all the ideas in there are powerful and are being explored in all the different ways of filmmaking, top down, that there is in kind of letting go of the kind of conventional story structure, it creates this room to explore things in a more deep way, and you run the risk of people watching it and not getting it and not liking it, because there are a lot of people that really don't like watching Blade Runner. But for the people that do, I think it taps into something that maybe you can't get if you're just trying to make a normal movie that anyone could sit down and watch and get into.
Right, for sure. I describe it, like, both the filmmaking visually and the storytelling, as just dense. Like, there's just so much being layered on top of one another. Like, even like just the quote we were just talking about with Blake, like that one quote gives a window to an entirely different interpretation for the film, and that stuff is happening constantly. It's just all the way through.
Yeah. I think more to what Michael was saying, I think if you just look on the page of the scenes between Rachel and Deckard, I think we can imagine a movie where it just doesn't work, where it is totally flat. I think if I was probably reading the script, having not seen the movie, I would probably not buy the romantic connection between the two. But once again, because it's just shot so methodically and operatically and slowly, it works. Really works.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those movies that puts you in a mood and then doesn't ever let you go. And I feel like it works because of, like you're saying, it's so dense. There's all these things happening all at once. And I think if you can tap into that, then you're kind of brought in and carried along on this like really wonderful journey. But I think it is not super accessible for people. So I think that's why there's this kind of barrier to entry. And I think that's why, it took me seeing it again to be able to access all of that.
And especially for people who saw this in the 80s, like, to have a movie that's combining so many genres at once.
Yeah.
Like, both of our videos touch on how it's basically it's film noir. But yeah, anytime you're crossing genres and stuff, it's very difficult to get an audience in on it unless they're fans of both genres.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think that's why I liked it more the second time, actually, is because I think in that time period I'd learned to really love film noir. And so I think having that kind of knowledge and background does make you appreciate what it's doing, and kind of adds that extra level of it's this new thing, but it's also paying homage to all of these previous films and this previous kind of storytelling. And whereas the old film noirs were sort of, about crime versus the law and like what's good and what's bad, it's kind of taking that formula and, where the private detective is kind of caught in between those two things, where he's not quite a good person, but he's not like the police officer either. He's not a criminal. He's not police. And Deckard is kind of in that place in this world where he has empathy for the replicants, but is also working for the police and is tasked to shut them down. And so I think having that kind of background helped me appreciate all the things that it was doing in the storytelling in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. When we were talking about Seven last time, Michael, we were talking about how there's some interesting parallels between Somerset and John Doe, and I think you could draw similar and between the protagonist and the antagonist. I think you can draw a similar thing here between Roy and Deckard, because they're both trained killers that are good at their job because they lack emotion. There's a line at the very beginning where Deckard says that his ex-wife used to call him sushi cold fish because he was so emotionless. And that's something that I've been looking for more in movies with protagonist and antagonist. I really like when there's some sort of level of association between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because it touches on the idea of Japanese dominance in this movie. It was sushi cold, you said, right?
Yeah, sushi cold, yeah.
So a big idea in all cyberpunk, and especially in Blade Runner, is the idea that Japan is going to become the dominant cultural force. So there's a lot of anxieties about that in cyberpunk. It's why cyberpunk looks so Japanese. This movie opens with a giant picture of a geisha on a billboard. Deckard's first scene is him eating noodles and rice from a Japanese. Presumably, I'm going to let me cut that part out.
Yeah, Japanese food stand.
Right. So he's eating Japanese food, which, when we watch it today, that doesn't register as anything to us. But in the 80s, that was kind of an anxiety in the air.
Yeah, because their economy was just woo,
right,
going
straight up.
Yeah.
So that's funny that extended to that line that's cut.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about eyes. So, like, eyes and photographs are a good motif in the movie. So, like, the second shot of the film is an extreme close-up of what I assume is Deckard's eye. Of course, the Voight-Kampff test focuses on eyes. Then they go to the guy who said who designed Roy's eyes. Then this also extends into photos. So Rachel shows Deckard a photo of her with her mother to prove that she's real. There's those more photos in Leon's apartment. And then I think it's perhaps deliberate that in Roy's final monologue, he says that I've seen things. And so I think we can all see how this focuses on perception, our inability to perhaps distinguish real and fake, especially when our memories could be false. But like Sage said at the beginning, I think ultimately it doesn't matter as long as those memories are there.
Right.
Yeah. Hold on one second. Yes, Woody? All right.
Yeah, and then there's that fabulous line when Roy seeks out the guy who makes the eyes, and he says to him, Chu, if you could only see what I've seen with your eyes, which just a fabulous little bit of writing there.
Yeah.
And it's, ironic that he's saying that to him, but also just like, it's not just having the eyes, it's like the fact that you have to have an experience and use them, right, to see something. Right?
Yeah.
So.
It is kind of an interesting idea to think about, kind of tying it back to memories also, that we know that our human memory is so fallible, and like we don't really remember things accurately, and so we feel like we have these memories, but maybe they're not even real. So I feel like that's kind of can discredit that as a test of what is alive or not. And I feel like, as I've been listening to you guys talk about the memories and the perception thing, I feel like what also matters is, the past helped us get to where we are, but it's about what we do now. And so like whether our memories are real or not, they got us to this place. They've informed who we are in this moment and the choices that we're going to make right now. And I feel like that doesn't matter whether you're a human or a replicant, whether they're real or fake. That's the important part.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this movie does that on like a really meta level with the music as well. So one big part of the music is this like a saxophone, kind of. Well, it sounds like a saxophone because it's done in an electronic way, but it's very much aping the cliche of the film noir movie.
I'm just gonna move this closer to you.
Sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. It's very much aping off of the cliche of saxophone music in film noir. They have the do 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 do. Right?
Yeah. Have you ever seen Thief?
I haven't. No.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's egregious, but yeah, the saxophone in that movie. But
right. But the funny thing about the cliche of saxophone in film noir is that it never existed. In actual film noir, they didn't. What's that?
Like 50s film noir, like 40 or 30s and 40s.
Yeah, in the 30s and 40s.
That's so interesting because as you were talking about that, I was like, oh right, like they do in the film noir, but like I couldn't find an example as I was running through my head.
Right. The reason it happened this way is because so there's no saxophone really in any film noir until the French start looking at film noir and taking it seriously. Hence why they named the genre. And at the same time, they were taking American jazz really seriously. So you have French directors in the French New Wave who start putting those two things together, and then eventually the Americans start copying the French off of that. So they start forming that cliche of there being this, this saxophone music in film noir, when that's only like a retrospective thing that we've implanted a memory in ourselves about that as a culture. And this movie uses that as well.
Yeah.
So, what do they call that? What do you call that? The Berenstain Bear thing? What is that called?
The Mandela effect.
The Mandela effect. Yeah.
Oh my god. Nothing drives me crazier than the Mandela effect. Like,
in that you actually do remember those things, or
no, just that the people like who are so narcissistic that it's not that they were wrong once. That the entire universe shifted when they blinked.
Right, taking it too serious. That's kind of one of the things about film noir that I find so fascinating. Just to kind of quickly touch on that point again, is that like it was a genre that we didn't know that we had. Like the French found it and identified it and named it, and then we started paying attention to them, paying attention to what we had done, and that's kind of how it became a thing.
Right, and that's such a cyberpunk idea of like these things shifting from one culture to another and blending together.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah.
Another cool visual thing happens in this movie when Zora, the snake replicant, snake lady, she dies among a store of mannequins. And I thought that was a pretty deliberate, interesting thing to further ask us to distinguish between a real person and a fake person. One could also say that as she dies, she's breaking through the glass, breaking through barriers, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe I'm stretching there. But
that's why this movie's so dense, is that you can look at any one little motif and extrapolate it out to the entire movie. Like, she dies and she gets 2 bullet holes in her shoulder blades, which, going back to the metaphor of these characters being fallen angels, right?
The wings.
Right. It'd be like if they got their wings clipped, like that's where the wounds would be.
Isn't it interesting how certain movies invite the ability to endlessly interpret, whereas others don't? Like, there's a certain mystical mystique around Kubrick to where there's really no levels of interpretation that are too deep to where people would say that, or like The Shining, for example.
Which is also in this movie.
The Shining?
In one of the cuts where they have the happy ending.
Oh, yeah.
They used aerial shots from The Shining to fill out the
That's
cut.
what, like, in one of the original cuts, it's him and Rachel in a car, like, leaving town or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I saw that in, like, the DVD extras or something.
Yeah, they, like, called up Kubrick. It was like, we know you shot a bunch of helicopter shots. Can we borrow them for this movie?
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
We could talk about religious imagery. I'm kind of sick of talking about religious imagery, but I think that, there's the whole thing with, you could say there's a Father, Son, Holy Spirit thing. So Father is like Tyrell, Son is Roy, because he even, like, when he's trying to stay alive, he's like grabbing his hand. He's like, no, not yet. And then he like sticks a nail in his hand, and it's very stigmata. And then I guess the Holy Spirit thing, you could say, is the dove flying away after Roy dies. I really like how in the scene when Roy meets Tyrell's wearing kind of a white holy-like robe. Tyrell essentially lives in a pyramid. And like you said earlier, one could read the William Blake poem as Roy likening himself to Lucifer, which you already said. But yeah, it's a super dense film, super interesting. Do you guys want to talk about let's talk about the unicorn. So So the unicorn was added in. So it was added from the original or the theatrical to the directors, and then expanded on in the directors to the final. Is that right?
Yeah. So first it's in the directors, and then expanded in the
But it was
final.
always intended to be in the original film.
And so
At least by Ridley Scott.
By Ridley Scott, yeah.
But it's not. Is that a memory that Deckard has, or it's just something that's in his head that he realized, or that Ridley Scott is trying to indicate to us that we're meant to think was implanted in his head, for perhaps Edward James Olmos's character to indicate to him that he is also a replicant?
Right. Yeah. If you're reading it as Ridley Scott wants to tell you very clearly that Deckard is a replicant, then he would have had the unicorn memory implanted in him.
But is it a memory? Like, who remembers a unicorn? Like, that just seems like, in those images, like, he's not there.
Right.
It just seems like...
Right, like the fact that he can see that at all is...
Right.
Like, he doesn't... Like, you don't need the extra step of the origami unicorn. Like, if you remember a unicorn, then something's wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've never really been clear about that, like why it needs to be a unicorn. Because...
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the unicorn is also shot from a different film, so they just are using that from something else.
I think it was like they shot it while they were shooting a different film or something, but that's why it looks pretty different and out of place. And yeah.
Because it could have been anything.
Right.
So.
I do like that at the end. At the end, he doesn't really dwell on it very much, and I think that goes more to the point of it not really mattering. Even if we're to say that Deckard does make the connection, he kind of just grabs the unicorn, turns around, and keeps going. It doesn't really affect his life if he's a replicant, if he realized it, or if he didn't. He's still going to go off and live his life to the fullest in the now with Rachel.
Right. He's going to go to the nuclear wasteland of Las Vegas.
Right. Kind of getting back to what you were saying just a minute ago, I kind of have a question for you guys of, certain movies are dense and invite this kind of endless discussion. Like, what do we think is required for that to happen? Because I feel like there's also plenty of movies that are dense and have a ton of meaning and nobody cares at all about. Like, I feel like there needs to be something else that makes people want to spend time finding the meaning and dissecting it. But I'm never sure what that is.
Yeah, there are certain movies that I have a general rule that, if I'm doing stuff for Wisecrack and it's like, we are just taking this on or analyzing this film because we think that, the audience will be interested in it, we'll just do it. But if it's like me personally, there have certainly been movies like, so for example, Darren Aronofsky's film Mother, I just hated that movie. And I knew that there was some subtextual stuff going on there, but I just wasn't willing to put in the effort because I didn't feel seduced enough. I needed to be seduced into being curious as to what he's saying, but I wasn't. So for me, you always have to give the audience something. The movie can't be 100% homework.
Right. And like the religious metaphors in Blade Runner, they're not so hit you over the head that you disengage from the film.
Yeah.
Like, they're there, and it increases in noticeability as the movie goes on. But like with Mother, it's like very clear up front, like, this is the Bible. This is, so
there is no text to that movie. There's only subtext.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting question. Whereas, like, what kind of justifies a certain level of reading? It depends on if you're looking at a movie just as something as an aspiring creator. If you're looking at a movie as an aspiring creator of either a screenwriter or a director or someone who wants to make movies, then there's probably a certain level of analysis that you really are going to only focus on the writer and director's intent. But if you're looking at a piece of media as a cultural artifact, as something that is consumed and as something that is consumed can construe messages that are perhaps not intended, then and that's largely what we do at Wisecrack, is kind of look at things like cultural artifacts. Then I think really any level of analysis is justified, because it's not whether or not the creator intended it. It's just if you can point to enough evidence to make the argument that the text suggests something. So, yeah.
Right, yeah. And if you can connect it to something else in popular culture or culture at large, right? It's you're crafting that meaning out of it.
Yeah. And that's pretty much all I've got. Is there anything else you guys wanted to bring up on the movie?
It's awesome.
It's so good.
Yeah, I agree.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever seen it in a theater?
That would be an experience.
Yeah, I don't think I have, actually.
I haven't. I would really love to.
I mean, that was one of the things I did appreciate about seeing Blade Runner 2049 in a theater is that I feel like I also haven't unpacked it, and so I don't have a whole lot of intelligent thoughts about it. But the experience of watching it, I felt like it was the most faithful sequel that I'd ever seen. Like, I feel like it kind of has a weird slow pacing problems, just like Blade Runner, and the same people that like love Blade Runner, I feel like can get into this movie, and the same people that were turned off by Blade Runner hated it, in my experience anyway. But sitting in the theater, I feel like I had what I kind of imagined might have been the experience for people back when the original Blade Runner came out, of just like this kind of vision of the future that is different and very detailed and takes its time and is dense and all that stuff.
It's sort of a miracle that the sequel exists.
Yeah.
Like, like movie studios are so cautious with where they put their money, and like they decided to make a really expensive sequel to a movie that's decades old and didn't make a lot of money.
Well, even unfortunately, the sequel was a catastrophe financially, and so I don't know if they'll ever do that again, which is really soul crushing. But yeah, I can't imagine the idea that a sequel was made to this movie by a different director and that it's good and that it's faithful is amazing.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen the trailers for Dr. Sleep, the sequel to The Shining?
Oh, I've heard about it. I've not seen it.
I heard that came.
It's real weird.
Yeah.
Not to get off on too much of a tangent, but so Ewan McGregor plays Danny from The Shining as he's like old.
Right, okay.
But not only that, in the trailer, they show footage from the Kubrick movie. Like, they show Danny on his tricycle, and then it flashes to Ewan McGregor on a bike or something. So it's like directly drawing this connection. I can't think of a more daunting task than having to make a sequel to a Kubrick movie. Like, who would take that job?
Sounds like such a terrible idea.
It's a horrible idea. I'm sure the guy who's directing it, by the way, his last movie was the widely acclaimed film Ouija. The Ouija board film. I'm being sarcastic. It was not. It was not acclaimed.
No, I got that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I actually haven't seen it, but I did check the reviews. I'm like, who is this guy that's taking up Kubrick's mantle? Okay, the Ouija guy. Well, good luck, bro. Yeah.
Like,
that's
you're
weird.
Just doomed to failure.
Or maybe this is the career turnaround that
we can hope, but that's a job.
Maybe.
I mean, if I'm being overly fanciful, that's a job I would turn down. Like if somebody said, "Here's $10 million for you to make a sequel to a Kubrick movie," I would say no. Like that's just not necessary, and I can't do it justice.
I'm really pumped for Dune. Is what I'm looking for.
Oh yeah. I have never seen the David Lynch one, even though David Lynch is one of my favorite filmmakers. I've just heard it's bad, so I have been avoiding it.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen any version of Dune. I'm reading Dune, but with Denis Villeneuve directing it, who is the director of Blade Runner 2049. That movie might bomb terribly too, but at least not. I'm kind of hoping that it becomes like the next thing.
It's the Aquaman is the main guy, right?
No, it's Timothy Chalamet is
okay.
the main character, and then his dad is Oscar Isaac, and Jason Momoa is in it.
Okay.
Yeah. I think everybody's in it.
Right? Yeah, there was like that.
What it seems.
There was like a weird couple of months where like all you heard was like, A-list actor joining Dune.
Right.
Well, that's what it was like in the 80s. I mean, everyone who was who in the 80s was in the David Lynch Dune. But I was reading David Lynch's biography, and that was the low point of his life and his career. It was just a nightmare, production and afterwards. But anyway, we're going on tangents. We're going to skip the mailbag today, guys. We just squeezed in this podcast since Sage was in town, so we said, come on over, we'll do a classic. We are going to be doing Midsummer next week, so apologies that we did not follow up on The Promise last week. But anyway, guys, I want to let you know, please check out both Michael and Sage's channels. They're some of the best stuff on YouTube. Sage's channel is Just Right. Michael's channel is Lessons from the Screenplay. If you listen to our 7 podcast, you already know that. Tell us a little bit about your channel and other stuff that you do, Sage.
So I make video essays on YouTube. They're about writing. They're about media analysis. I cover a bunch of different mediums. I got a video game video on the way.
Oh, cool.
So that's
Can you tell us which game, or is it secret?
No, I can tell you. It's not. I've been promising my patrons that I do a video on The Witcher.
Oh, cool.
So I'm doing but it's going to be The Witcher, and also The Last of Us is going to be in there. So
I just replayed The Last of Us. So good.
It's
Wait, so
very good.
how long did you have to play The Witcher to research that?
Oh, that's better unanswered.
A lot of research time. It's definitely research.
Yeah.
I mean, I've played a bit of The Witcher 3, and that thing is big.
It's humongous.
It's so good, though.
It's maybe my favorite game.
Cool.
It's great. Every part of it. So
Awesome. Michael, anything you want to plug?
We recently launched a podcast of our own called Beyond the Screenplay, where me and the writing team and the people that help make all the videos for Lessons of the Screenplay, we do deeper dives into each of the movies that we've covered on the channel. And then occasionally we have guests on, like we recently had John August on, who wrote
That's so awesome.
Aladdin and Big Fish, and he was really awesome, had a lot of good tips for screenwriters, and we had the writing team behind Searching, the John Cho movie that came out last year. So so that's a thing that we're doing. Sage will be on a future episode.
That you guys are going to record right now.
We're going to go record right now.
Cool. Well, guys, it was a pleasure having you. Can't wait to do this again next time you're in town, Sage.
yeah, for
Whenever
sure.
whenever you want, Michael. You're just around the
Awesome.
corner.
Yeah, always fun.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Peace.